You have gathered here tonight, perhaps expecting answers. Yet as I stand before you, I must tell you from the very beginning, the deepest truths are those that disturb, that pull at the invisible threads between our waking lives and the ancient dreams beneath. There are bonds in human life that appear luminous on the surface, born of love, need, or the longing for recognition, yet underneath, in the shadowed depths, these very bonds can become the most treacherous rivers, carrying us toward unknown destinies. Among all these invisible tethers, none is more fraught with peril, none more enigmatic and potent than the hidden bond between an empath and a narcissist. You must forgive me if I do not speak in the tongue of the scientist tonight, for science, as it is practiced in its sterile laboratories, often fears the shadow, seeks to banish the irrational, and flees from the irrational dark. But the psyche, your psyche, is not a laboratory, it is a living myth, an endless forest, a labyrinth where every path leads deeper still. And so, to understand why such a bond is dangerous, even fated, we must be willing to cross the threshold together and step into the dream, the symbol, the wound that waits in the collective heart. The world has named the narcissist and the empath as opposites. One who craves to be seen, adoret, made the sun of another sky, and one who feels too much, whose skin is so thin to the suffering of others that they become like a vessel, open and receptive, as if the winds of fate could blow straight through their soul. But what the world calls opposites, I see as complements, shadows dancing in mutual orbit. For the empath and the narcissist are not merely two people who meet, they are two archetypes colliding, each activating ancient patterns within the other, each carrying a fragment of the other's secret longing. Let me invite you, then, into the imaginal. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture the dream. A great hall in a forgotten palace, two mirrors facing one another. The narcissist, ever in search of reflection, stands before the empath, who has spent their life learning to become invisible, to reflect the world, to hold pain as their own. In that reflection, the narcissist sees an endless well, someone who can confirm their existence, validate every hunger, shield them from the terror of emptiness. And the empath, gazing into the dazzling radiance of the narcissist, finds a sun to orbit, a purpose, a drama so intense that their own suffering becomes sanctified, made meaningful. This is not merely a story of two people. It is a cosmic drama played out within the psyche of humanity. At its core lies a mystery. Why does suffering so often masquerade as love? Why does the one who feels everything become enthralled to the one who feels nothing but their own need? Here, we encounter what I have always called the shadow, the denied, unintegrated parts of our own souls, projected outward and made flesh in the other. Consider, for a moment, the empath. What is this peculiar gift to feel what others do not feel? To intuit unspoken wounds, to carry the sorrows of an entire room without a single word being uttered. The world may call this sensitivity, but in the language of the soul, it is something deeper, a primordial wound, an ancient inheritance. Many who are called empaths have learned from the earliest moments of their childhood that the world is unsafe, that love is conditional, that survival depends upon anticipating the moods and storms of others. This is not just psychology, it is alchemy. The empath soul, in an unconscious act of self-preservation, dissolves its own boundaries and becomes the vessel for another's unspoken anguish. And the narcissist, the word has been abused, weaponized in common language, but in truth, the narcissist is not simply a villain, not a cartoon tyrant who delights in cruelty. Rather, narcissism is a defense, a fortress built stone by stone around a deep, unspeakable void, a place where love was once promised but never truly given. The narcissist cannot gaze inward. What awaits there is terror, the absence of meaning, the horror of emptiness. Instead, they seek mirrors in the outer world, adoration, worship, endless confirmation that they exist, that they are real, that they matter. When these two ancient wounds meet, what occurs is not a romance, but an archetypal possession. Each sees in the other what they cannot find in themselves. The empath becomes the ocean, the narcissist the thirsty wanderer. The narcissist offers a sun to orbit, a dazzling selfhood that promises the empath relief from their own diffuse sense of self. And so begins a spiral, a psychic dance, both beautiful and monstrous, a dance as old as myth, written in the blood and dreams of every culture that has ever dared to name the soul. Do you see, then, how dangerous this bond becomes? Not because of mere cruelty or the simplistic stories of victim and perpetrator. It is dangerous because it is a conspiracy of the unconscious, a mutual agreement to keep the deepest wounds alive. The empath, longing to be loved for their giving, for their endless patience, continues to pour themselves into the bottomless cup of the narcissist. And the narcissist, ever hungry, ever desperate, demands more and more, never satisfied, never whole. The more the empath gives, the less of themselves remains. The more the narcissist takes, the more their own emptiness is confirmed. Here, in this hall of mirrors, both are lost. The empath, by giving away their essence, becomes a ghost within their own life, wandering rooms where their own needs are never spoken. The narcissist, surrounded by adoration, becomes increasingly brittle, increasingly terrified that the mirror will one day shatter and they will be left alone with the unspeakable void. This is not a relationship. It is a mutual haunting, an energetic pact to never awaken, never see, never heal the wound at the center of the self. Yet, you might ask, if this is all fate and shadow, is there any hope? Are we doomed to play out these ancient dramas, to be forever caught in the whirlpool of need and neglect? Here, the language of dreams becomes our ally. For the psyche does not speak in logic, but in symbol, in image, in the sudden eruption of meaning that occurs when we dare to look inward. Let me offer you a dream told to me by a patient many years ago, but which could belong to any of you, for it is woven from the threads of the collective unconscious. In the dream, the dreamer finds themselves in a vast garden at dusk. There is a fountain at the center, but the water has gone dry. All around are figures made of glass, beautiful but empty, wandering endlessly in search of water. The dreamer feels the urge to break open their own chest and pour what little water they have into the fountain, hoping it will bring life back to the garden. But as they do, the water disappears instantly, soaked up by the thirsty earth, and the garden remains barren. In despair, the dreamer sits beside the dry fountain and weeps. This dream, like the bond between Empath and Narcissist, is not merely a private vision. It is a map, a warning, an initiation. The fountain is the self, the source of life and renewal. The garden is the world we seek to nourish, to heal, to make beautiful through our sacrifice. The glass figures are those around us, beautiful, fragile, yearning, but unable to hold what we give. The urge to break oneself open, to give until nothing remains, is the archetypal wound of the empath. The earth that drinks all, yet is never satisfied, is a wound of the narcissist. The dream ends not with resolution, but with weeping, a baptism of sorrow, a recognition that one cannot heal the world by bleeding out their own life. In this moment of despair, the true work of the soul begins. The dreamer must turn inward, away from the empty garden, and seek the underground spring, the hidden source of life that waits beneath the surface, beyond the reach of others' needs and projections. As I speak these words, I sense a restlessness in the room, a tension, perhaps even anger, for the mind rebels against the idea that suffering is not random, that our worst entanglements are not mere accidents, but invitations to awakening. We want to believe that if only the narcissist would change, if only the empaths would learn to love themselves, all would be well. But the psyche is not a problem to be solved. It is a labyrinth to be entered, a darkness to be honored. Healing does not mean the end of suffering, but the willingness to descend into it, to make meaning of it, to allow it to transform us from within. In the myth of Persephone, she is abducted into the underworld, stolen from the surface world of sunlight and safety. There, in the realm of Hades, she discovers her own shadow, her own power, her own capacity to survive the darkness. The empath, too, must be abducted, must be forced by the pain of the bond to descend into their own underworld, to meet the parts of themselves they have denied. The narcissist, trapped in their own hell of mirrors, must eventually face the truth that no amount of adoration will fill the void within. Both must in their own way, become initiates of the dark, or else remain forever trapped in a dance of mutual consumption. I tell you these things not to frighten you, but to awaken you, for every wound is also a doorway, every entanglement a summons from the soul. The bond between empath and narcissist is not a curse, but a calling, a chance to become conscious, to see what has always been hidden, to reclaim the fragments of self we have given away. The work is not easy. It demands that we turn away from the comfort of blame, from the seduction of victimhood, and instead ask, what in me seeks this pain? What ancient pattern am I enacting? What shadow have I projected onto the other? And how might I call it home? The path ahead is not straight, nor is it safe, but it is the only path worthy of a soul, for in the descent, in the willingness to meet the shadow, to grieve, to rage, to awaken, we become truly human. Not perfect, not unbreakable, but real, capable of love that does not destroy, of boundaries that protect, of compassion that does not bleed us dry. Let us pause here, for the hour grows late, and the work we have begun tonight will not end with these words. As you leave this hall, do not seek to forget what has been spoken. Instead, let the images linger, let the dreams speak, let the wounds ache. For in your suffering, in your longing, in the dangerous bond, you cannot escape. You will find the map to your own awakening. If you have journeyed with me thus far, perhaps you have felt a stirring, a subtle recognition that the story I am telling is not about distant others, but about the ancient struggle within yourself. The empath and the narcissist are not mere characters in a tragic play, but living symbols of forces at work in every human soul. When we meet them in the world, we are also meeting them in the inner sanctum of our being. There is no true separation, for what we most resist outwardly is often what we most deny inwardly. It is only in the willingness to see ourselves mirrored in the other that true transformation becomes possible. Let me return for a moment to the nature of the empath's gift, a gift that so often feels more like a burden, a wound disguised as sensitivity. For centuries, those who felt too deeply, who absorbed the feelings and fates of others, were cast as healers, shamans, oracles. Yet beneath the blessing lies a secret history of pain. I have listened to countless souls whose earliest memories are not of laughter, but of tension, of rooms gone cold, of learning to read the unspoken moods of adults whose love was conditional, whose presence was unpredictable. The child, faced with this mystery, discovers a power to survive. They must attune themselves, become exquisitely sensitive to every nuance, every hidden desire, every storm brewing beneath the surface. This is the birth of the empath, but it is also the birth of the exile. The price of this psychic attunement is that one's own needs must be sacrificed, pushed into the shadows for the sake of harmony. The child learns to disappear into others, to merge, to become the mirror, this merging is seductive. It promises safety, connection, even love, but it comes at a cost over time. The empath forgets where they end and others begin. Their identity becomes a patchwork of others' feelings, dreams, wounds. They wander the world half here, half vanished, searching for someone who might finally see them, who might give them back to themselves. Now, consider the narcissist, not the caricature, not the villain, but the human being locked in a fortress of mirrors. Their wound is different, yet equally profound. Where the empath dissolves their boundaries, the narcissist builds walls so thick that nothing real can enter. The world becomes a stage, and every person a player in the drama of their own self-preservation. They, too, are haunted by an absence, an unfulfilled promise, a love never truly received, a self that feels hollow, undefined, perpetually at risk of collapse. To survive, they demand reflection, adoration, certainty that they exist. Every relationship is thus transactional. Every interaction, a means to stave off the terror of inner emptiness. It is here, in the archetypal dance between the dissolving empath and the hungry narcissist, that we find the crucible of transformation. Neither can truly save the other. The empath, for all their sacrifice, cannot fill the narcissist's void. The narcissist, for all their demands, cannot grant the empath a sense of true being. They are drawn together by unconscious longing, but remain forever at cross purposes, one seeking to merge, the other to consume. This is not love, but a mutual haunting, a shadow play that deepens each wound while promising its healing. Some of you may wonder why, knowing this danger, we so often choose it, why the empath is drawn again and again into the orbit of the narcissist, why the pain of the familiar outweighs the terror of the unknown. The answer, I believe, lies in the mystery of repetition. The psyche, you see, is not logical, it is mythic. It seeks not comfort, but wholeness, and so it recreates the original wound over and over in 1,000 disguises until consciousness breaks through, until the pattern is seen, until the suffering is transformed into meaning. Imagine a dream, if you will. A woman stands on the shore, watching ships disappear into mist. Each ship carries away a piece of her. Each wave erases her footprints in the sand. She is compelled to give to self, to send herself out in search of recognition, yet each attempt leaves her emptier, more invisible. One night, as she sleeps, the sea itself rises and speaks. You are not meant to vanish. The sea whispers, but to become the vessel. Do not pour yourself away, contain, receive. Become the well from which others may drink, but do not lose your own depth. The dream is both a warning and a promise. Transformation is possible, but only if the pattern is recognized Only if the energy of sacrifice is turned inward and made creative. It is a paradox. What saves the empath is not more giving, but the radical act of containment. To become the vessel, one must learn to hold, to differentiate, to honor the boundaries of self. This does not mean becoming cold or closed, but rather rooted, embodied, zu vereinen. It is an alchemical reversal. What once was poured away is now gathered, distilled, made luminous from within. The empath who learns this becomes not a victim, but an artist of relationship, a creator of new forms. Their compassion is no longer a wound, but a power, a channel for healing that does not require their own diminishment. And for the narcissist, here, too, there is hope, but the path is more difficult. The fortress of mirrors must be broken. The carefully constructed self must be allowed to shatter. This is a terrifying prospect. It is, in truth, a kind of death, the death of the false self, the mask, the persona. Only through this breaking can the true self emerge, a self capable of love, of vulnerability, of genuine connection. The narcissist's task is to face the emptiness within, to endure the loneliness, the grief, the shame, and in so doing, to discover the inner wellspring that cannot be filled from without. It is tempting to believe that the empath and the narcissist are locked forever in their roles, doomed to repeat the cycle endlessly. But I tell you, from my own work and from the great myth of humanity, that change is always possible. The key is consciousness awareness that pierces the veil of repetition, that sees the pattern, that names the wound. In this seeing, a new story becomes possible. The empath who claims their own depth becomes a healer, not a martyr. The narcissist who faces their emptiness becomes a seeker, not a despot. Together, if both are willing, they can transform the dangerous bond into a crucible of awakening, a place where true relationship is born. Let us descend even deeper, for there is another layer, still the realm of dreams, of symbols, of the unconscious, that weaves all relationships together. The bond between empath and narcissist is not merely psychological, it is archetypal, mythic, cosmic. It echoes the ancient stories of gods and mortals, of lovers and betrayers, of creation and destruction. In every age, in every culture, there are tales of those who give everything and those who take all. These stories are not warnings, but invitations, calls to consciousness, to the heroic work of integration in the language of alchemy, which is the language of transformation. There is a stage called the nigredo, the blackening, the descent into chaos and confusion. The dangerous bond is the nigredo of relationship, the place where all certainties are dissolved, where suffering becomes the fire that purifies. To pass through the nigredo is to accept that suffering is not meaningless, but necessary, that only through the darkness can the gold of the self be discovered. What, then, is the gold that waits within the darkness? It is the gift of individuation, the process by which each soul becomes whole, unique, So verein. For the empath, individuation means reclaiming what was lost: voice, will, identity. For the narcissist, it means relinquishing the false self, enduring the pain of exposure, discovering the reality of interdependence. The bond in this light is not a punishment, but a summons to growth, a sacred wound that calls each soul to awaken. As I look upon you now, I sense a deep longing, the longing to be free, to be whole, to be truly seen. This longing is not a flaw, but a compass. It points the way to the hidden heart of the self, the place where all wounds can be transformed into wisdom. The journey is not easy. It asks everything of us: our courage, our honesty, our willingness to risk loss for the sake of truth. Yet I promise you, as one who has walked a labyrinth, that there is meaning in the struggle, there is beauty in the descent, and there is gold in the darkness. If you find yourself caught in the dangerous bond, do not despair. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are called to awaken, to descend, to rise again as something more whole, more true, more luminous than you have ever known. And so, as the night deepens and the veil between conscious certainty and unconscious truth grows thinner, I invite you to linger in the borderlands between knowledge and not knowing, for the great work of the soul is not to rush to answers, but to abide in questions that reshape the landscape of the heart. What is it truly to love? What is it to be seen, not as a mirror for another's hunger, nor as a vessel to be emptied, but as a sovereign being, luminous in your own right, carrying both shadow and light in sacred tension? The world in which you live offers simple dichotomies, words and diagnoses meant to order the chaos, but the psyche laughs at such neatness. It moves in spirals, in images, in paradox. The dangerous bond between empath and narcissist is a spiral, not a line. It is a passage, a spiral staircase, winding down into the deep places where your soul remembers what the ego would rather forget. Each descent brings not an end, but a new beginning, a new face of the self, glimpsed in the dim candlelight of consciousness. How many times have you found yourself returning to the same pain, the same story, the same longing? The mind rebels, the heart aches. Yet, beneath these struggles is the movement of the archetype, an ancient drama replayed so that something hidden might finally be seen. The empath, so quick to merge, must at last become distinct. The narcissist, so desperate to dominate, must finally relinquish control. Both are asked to sacrifice what is most precious to them, the empath, their habit of self-abandonment. The narcissist, their illusion of supremacy. Only then does the alchemical process begin, the separation of gold from dross, of essence from illusion. I have witnessed this transformation in the dreams of my patients. There was a man who dreamed he wandered through a desert, endlessly searching for an oasis. Every time he thought he found water, it was a mirage, an illusion that vanished when he reached for it. Exhausted, he fell to his knees and wept. In his despair, the sand parted, revealing a spring bubbling up from the depths. Only in surrender did he discover the true source, hidden all along beneath his own feet. This is the paradox of the soul. What you seek in the other must first be found within. The water you long to give or to receive is not in the mirage of outward approval or adoration. It is in the deep, quiet places within you, waiting for your attention, your reverence, your care. To turn inward is no easy task. The ego will resist, inventing reasons to avoid the descent. Fear of loneliness, fear of loss, fear of annihilation, all these arise as guardians at the gate. Yet, like the mythical heroes of old, you are called not to slay these guardians, but to honor them. The fear that arises when you contemplate separation from the dangerous bond is not your enemy. It is a signpost, a guide pointing to the next layer of the labyrinth. To walk this path is to become intimate with your own vulnerability, to risk being misunderstood, even abandoned by those who once defined your reality. I have often said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But this privilege is earned, not given. It requires the willingness to disappoint others, to endure misunderstanding, to be alone with your own heart until its song grows strong enough to carry you forward. For the empath, this means withdrawing the projection of salvation, ceasing to offer yourself as the solution to another's emptiness. It means, paradoxically, loving yourself enough to endure the pain of another's disappointment, to withstand the collapse of the old story in which your worth depended upon your sacrifice. For the narcissist, the work is equally profound. It is to stand naked before the void, to surrender the endless search for reflection, to discover the richness of the world beyond the self. This is the long night of the soul, when the mirrors break and silence rushes in, when the desperate hunger for adoration yields to the softer hunger for meaning, for connection, for truth. Not all will choose this path. Many will cling to the illusion, preferring the familiar torment of the dangerous bond to the unknown territory of transformation. Yet even the refusal to change is itself a stage on the journey, a necessary prelude to the awakening that awaits in its own time. Do not be discouraged if you feel lost. The way through is not linear, nor is it swift. The psyche moves at the pace of eternity, not the clock. There will be moments of clarity, brief flashes, when the pattern becomes visible, when the old wound aches not with pain, but with promise. There will also be moments of confusion, regression, doubt. Trust that these, too, are part of the dance, the spiral, the sacred work. The unconscious is a patient teacher. It will return to its lesson as often as necessary, until the truth is not merely understood, but embodied. Imagine for a moment that your life is a tapestry woven from countless threads, some bright, some dark, some knotted and frayed. The dangerous bond is one such thread, but it is not the whole design. If you pull too hard, you may unravel more than you intend. If you ignore it, the knot grows tighter. The task is to approach your own story with reverence, curiosity, and compassion. What does this bond reveal about your deepest needs, your oldest wounds, your hidden strengths? How might you honor its lessons without becoming its prisoner? There are no prescriptions, no universal answers. The work is as individual as your own fingerprint, as mysterious as the dreams that visit you in the night. Yet there are ways subtle, sacred, and utterly personal to engage the unconscious. Pay attention to your dreams, for they will tell you what the waking mind cannot. Listen to the body, whose symptoms and sensations speak the language of the soul. Seek solitude, not as a punishment, but as a crucible in which your true self may be revealed, and, above all, cultivate the courage to speak truth, first to yourself and then to others. Even when your voice trembles, even when the old patterns resist, you are not alone in this work. The archetypes that inhabit the psyche are older than any one life. They are the companions of your journey, the teachers who appear in many guises. When you encounter the dangerous bond, whether in love, in friendship, or within the family, recognize it as a visitation from the unconscious, an invitation to consciousness. The pain you feel is not a punishment, but a summons. The longing that drives you to repeat the pattern is not a flaw, but a sign of the soul's hunger for wholeness. In time, if you persist, the spiral will turn. The pain that once seemed unbearable will yield to insight. The story that bound you will open into freedom. You will see with new eyes that what you suffered was not meaningless, but necessary, a crucible in which your spirit was forged. The dangerous bond will become a source of wisdom, a wound transformed into a wellspring, and from this place of healing, you will find yourself able to offer compassion, not the compassion of self-sacrifice, but the compassion that arises from strength, from wholeness, from having walked through fire and emerged, at last, alive. As we near the end of this shared journey tonight, I would leave you not with doctrine, but with invitation. Let these words be not an answer, but a threshold. Return to your life with eyes attuned to symbol, to shadow, to the quiet urgings of the soul. Attend to your dreams, your resistances, your moments of longing and sorrow, for these are the guideposts on your own spiral path. The unconscious is alive and responsive. It awaits only your willingness to listen, to risk, to awaken. If you feel compelled to begin this inner work, do so gently, reverently, as one who approaches a sacred spring after a long drought. Let reflection become a practice, not a duty. Let solitude become a sanctuary, not a sentence. Let your suffering become the teacher it has always longed to be. The spiral awaits. The descent is not a fall, but a return. The dangerous bond, in the end, is not your enemy, but your initiator calling you always to the heart of yourself.